you all very much. It's great. Tyrone, thank you for inviting me here, and thank you for working with me to accommodate my schedule. I must say, this is my first Stars and Stripes dinner, and I got to tell you, there is just a great sense of family and community here, and you ought to feel very good and very proud of that. And how about a big hand for all these pioneers up here that have really led the way for everybody else? Now, even in a close family like this, being the 10th speaker at the end of a long night is not easy. And it reminds me of a story about a Air Force pilot, an Army general, and a Marine Corps sergeant major, and they're all in a POW camp. And one afternoon, the commandant comes in and says, "I got bad news for you. Tomorrow at dawn, you're all going to face the firing squad, but I'm here to grant you your last wish." He looks at the Air Force pilot and says, "Major, what's your last wish?" He said, "I would like to have my last meal by candlelight with a beautiful woman." He said, "It will be done." He looks at the Army general and says, "General, what's your last wish?" He sucks himself up to his full height of 5'9". And he says, "I'd like to address the troops one more time." He says, "It will be done." He looks at that old Marine Sergeant Major and says, "Sergeant Major, what's your last request?" He says, "I'd like to be shot an hour before the general starts talking." So I thought I'd have a couple of engineer jokes to liven you up. And since I got on the Army here, I got a joint engineer joke, and I must say, it was 52 that gave it all up. So it was right after Sputnik went up. You know, the Eisenhower administration was in a crash program. They just moved a whole bunch of engineers into the space program, and there was an Air Force engineer, an Army engineer, and a Navy engineer, and they're all doing what we do, you know, sitting around and kind of giving it my service is better than your service kind of stuff. And the Navy guy says, "Well, you know, in a few months, the Navy expects to have a pilot in orbit." Well, the Army guy, not to be outdone, says, "In a year, we expect to have a man on the moon." And the Air Force guy looks at him and says, "That's nothing. We're going to put a man on the sun." And the Army Navy guy said, What are you talking about? How are you going to put a man on the sun?" He said, "We're going to go in the dark." Then there's that other famous story about engineers from the French Revolution. When you had a priest, a lawyer, and an engineer, and I was going to say it's a naval engineer, so work with me a little bit. And they're all sentenced to death, and they're facing the guillotine. So they take that priest, and they throw him down there in the guillotine, and they pull the cord, and nothing happens. And the priest gets up and says, "Hey, that's divine intervention. You have to release me." And they said, "You're okay, go." So they take that lawyer, and they throw the lawyer down there. And they pull the cord again. Nothing happens. The lawyer says, "Hey, that's double jeopardy. You can't do that, and you have to release me." So they did. So they take that old engineer, and they throw that engineer down there, and they're getting ready to pull the cord. The engineer looks up and says, "Hey, I see what the problem is." One last one here. I'm having fun with this. So here, for the first time anywhere, unveiled, are the top 10 reasons or indicators that you might be an engineer. Number 10, you can type 70 words a minute, but you can't read your own handwriting. Number 9, you have more friends on the internet than you do in person. Number 8, you look forward to Christmas so you can put the kids' toys together. Number 7, when you see a great design, you still have to change it. I like this one. Number 6, you spent more money on your calculator than you did on your wife's engagement ring. Number 5. I can see there's a little truth in that last one. Huh? Number 5. You chuckle when anyone says centrifugal force. I didn't get that one either. Yeah. Number 4. You've already calculated how much you make per second. Number 3. You've tried to fix a $5 radio. Number 2. Your subscription to Scientific American and Popular Mechanics costs more than your gym membership. And lastly, the number one reason or number one indicator that you may be an engineer is that you're on lookout point with your sweetheart on Valentine's Day, gazing up at the stars. You look her in the eye and say, I wonder which one of those is a geosynchronous satellite.